Hi there, this is Seth Abramovich, senior writer at The Hollywood Reporter, and I'm your host on It Happened in Hollywood. This week, we have one of the most gloriously weird cult films from the mid-'80s, starring Harry Dean Stanton and Emilio Estevez. All that and more on this week's episode of It Happened in Hollywood. Okay, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed last week's season premiere with Terry Gilliam. That was a lot of fun. And this week's is fun too. I arrive at the movies and the guests that I feature on the show in different ways. This week was kind of circuitous in that it started as another film, Kiss Me Deadly, which is from 1955, a very strange film noir that's very influential, and features a glowing box which is supposed to represent angst over the nuclear threat hanging over the United States. And it's been borrowed by other filmmakers, including Tarantino, who used it in Pulp Fiction, and this week's guest, Alex Cox, writer-director of 1984's Repo Man. It was suggested to me by a listener, Chris LeClaire, a screenwriter, and when we were discussing Kiss Me Deadly, he reminded me of Repo Man and how it used another glowing box. And I thought, wow, that would be a great episode. So thanks, Chris. And here we have it. Alex is a British guy. He's sort of the opposite of what Terry Gilliam did. He was born in Britain and then was drawn to the United States in the 70s. And he attended UCLA Film School. And this was his first feature. Luckily for him, and he'll explain how it happened, Mike Nesmith from the Monkees. Hey, we're the Monkees, and people say we monkey around. Became a fan of his talent and the script and hooked him up with a Universal producer. And so it became a Universal production. Interestingly enough, in 1998, he was supposed to write and direct Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, but he ended up writing it and being dropped from the film as director, replaced by last week's guest, Terry Gilliam. So lots of connecting threads here. He later directed Sid and Nancy, which was a biopic about Sid Vicious from the Sex Pistols and Nancy Spungen, his American girlfriend, and their doomed romance. But this was his first and a very beloved cult classic from 1984. And one thing I want you to pay attention to is the influence of punk rock on this film. There was definitely a hardcore scene bubbling up in the West Coast at the time, and Alex Cox was a fan of punk in England, and he definitely made that part of the soundtrack and part of the cast, and it really pulses through the entire film and kind of gives it its esprit de corps. So, punk will be a recurring theme this season. This is just the first example of it. So enjoy the music that comes with it and enjoy this interview. Alex Cox, director of Repo Man. Let's get started. Repo Man. This film first came to my attention in high school when a lot of my punk-loving friends, the boys mostly, would quote it incessantly in class and outside class. And I was like, well, I have to see this movie. Everyone's talking about it. And I saw it, and it really blew my mind, my teenage mind. It had so many things that appealed to me. None of them were ones that you associate with mainstream Hollywood movie. You had punk rock, and just this very rule-breaking DIY aesthetic. And it just was very cool. It was the coolest movie there was.
Wow, thank you very much.
And I watched it again recently, as I always do on the show. And boy, did I enjoy it. It really has its own language and rhythm and internal logic. And you come away kind of wanting to go back to that world.
Let's hope so.
And I know that, various sequels and things have been discussed over the years, but we'll get to that at the end. At first, I want to start at the very beginning. So let's talk about how you got to UCLA. Let's start there. Did you go there with the intention of making films, or what brought you to UCLA?
Yes, with the intention of making films. I had a Fulbright fellowship from the Fulbright Foundation to go to UCLA for a year and study film.
And you studied the film history and Kurosawa and all the greats?
It should be that way. Yeah, that's definitely what should happen at film school. Students should be forced to see nothing but great films for a year before they do anything else. But I was in the critical studies program for the first year and then transferred to the production program my second and third years there in graduate school. But definitely, I think the more you sit watching great films in a darkened cinema, the better.
And who were your biggies? Who did you really just idolize?
My favorite filmmakers were Buñuel, and Kurosawa, of course, and also. But I was a big fan of cowboy films too. I loved Sam Peckinpah, and I loved Sergio Leone and the Italian westerns, and Melville, all the boy directors.
And in terms of, you came out of England, so this is just set us in the era. Is it the era of the Sex Pistols and punk ascending, the Clash, or what world did you come out of?
It was like 1977 was when I went to the United States, and 77 was when it really kicked off, although it was obviously happening in 76 as well. And so I was in Los Angeles for the great English fluorescence of punk. But then it came to Los Angeles. Then it showed up in LA in its own very specific form. And I was around for that. And that was quite fascinating.
And were you of the punk fold? Were you a punk yourself, or you just were observing as an artist and
No,
intrigued?
I had the haircut, and I had a checkered shirt and a T-shirt. Definitely. I was definitely part of the punk movement of Los Angeles. A little old for it, really. There were a lot of younger people than me, but it was just so thrilling because there were just so many good bands. There was like X and Fear and Suicidal Tendencies and The Plugs, and there's so many amazing bands. The Weirdos. So many great bands, and it was all happening, all fluorescing. And at the same time, these bands from outside the city were coming to Los Angeles as well. Like Devo came and played in the basement, and Talking Heads played at UCLA, and the Clash came. What could be more exciting?
I know. There's just something so refreshingly lo-fi and authentic about it, and your film really captures that moment. And I love these films that capture a moment. Last season, we did Desperately Seeking Susan, and we did After Hours, and it was more of a New York 80s, lightning in a bottle. But I love that this is punk and LA. It's a whole different thing.
And the other film to pair with it, which is also those two things, is Penelope Spheeris' film Suburbia, which also takes place in a punk environment. It has a lot of music, and both films were made at the same time, as I recall.
Yeah, it just seemed like throw the rule book out era. It was just like, let's just do this, and it's very exciting to watch because it feels fresh. It's not playing by any rule book.
I think partially it's the cinematographers too, because we had Robbie Mueller shooting it, and he had been Wim Wenders' cinematographer. They'd shot Kings of the Road and The American Friend, so they had a very good relationship and a very good way of filmmaking. I'm sure that some of that rubbed off on us from Robbie. And then when Robbie went back to went back to Germany. Oh no, actually he went off to shoot Paris, Texas, and then went back to Germany when we needed to shoot some more. Robert Richardson, it was his first feature film, and so I think the two of them contributed a great deal. And also the guy who lit the film, Greg Gardner, really created that visual aspect inside the cars when Harry Dean is driving through Los Angeles in his car. There's an internal lighting in the car which is very specific and really and creates a tremendous atmosphere.
Yes, it's an absolutely beautiful film, and I guess it's worth saying that Harry Dean Stanton, went on to become the lead actor in Paris, Texas, and I guess we have your cinematographer Robbie Mueller to thank for that. I think he recommended him based on his work in Repo Man. Is that right?
Yes, I think so, because as I recall, they got the money for it, and right after Repo Man, Wim Wenders was going to make Paris, Texas, but with Dean Stockwell in the lead.
Mm.
And then Robbie, after the first day of Repo Man, Robbie calls Wim Wenders from his motel that evening and says, "You got to check out this guy, Harry Dean Stanton." And sure enough, he became the lead. And Dean Stockwell has got a major role in Paris, Texas. But Harry Dean is incredible in it.
He's incredible. I mean, what a legend. And what an amazing performance in this film. But we're getting ahead of ourselves a bit. So I want to first figure out how you came up with this idea of a sort of sci-fi meets Repo Man, urban crime sci-fi story. I don't even know how you describe it. But
well, I had wanted to make a film about the danger of nuclear war, and the immorality of the neutron bomb, in the imminence of our nuclear doom. And somehow nobody seemed to want to make a film, finance a film with that as its principal theme. So then I thought, okay, what I'll do is I'll tie it together with the repo business, because I have a neighbor who's a repo man, and I'm going to ride around in his car and learn the repo trade from my friend. And then I'll combine that with the deranged nuclear scientist drifting through Los Angeles in his car with a nuclear bomb in the back. But then there wasn't a lot of enthusiasm for that either. So then I thought, okay, well, I'll combine like the nuclear bomb in the back of the car with the Repo Men with punk rock, and teenagers, and that seemed to be the combination that finally worked.
And aliens.
And aliens as well. Oh yeah, and aliens, and make it look like a 50s science fiction movie. Yes, yes.
I love that you mentioned that sort of atomic angst, because this was, of course, during the Cold War, and Ronald Reagan was president, and there really was that hanging over everyone, just this fear of nuclear annihilation. And I feel like it's come around again in a way. I mean, now the way we talk about World War III and Russia and Ukraine, there is this nuclear angst, and then the film itself, I believe, is inspired by Kiss Me Deadly, which was also under the post-World War II nuclear angst.
I think the structure is inspired by Kiss Me Deadly, because Dennis Dolan, the editor of the film, was very keen that we give it a little bit more structural complexity. And I think it was his idea that we should shoot a couple more scenes involving the trunk opening. And then I'm thinking, well, if the trunk's going to open and a light's going to come out, it's going to be like Kiss Me Deadly, And so then we kind of followed the structure. I think it's the same number of trunk openings as box openings in Kiss Me Deadly, and each time with more serious consequences.
And Kiss Me Deadly, another classic LA film. I just watched it again recently, and so beautiful and weird and great. And what do you think it is about that? They call it the Great What's It in Kiss Me Deadly, but there is a box and it glows and it's in a locker, and eventually it opens up and people get burned alive. And what is it about that narrative a thing that so captivates or works in movies?
Well, I think, in that sense, it's reflecting that the terrible fear of those times, of the 50s and of the 80s, of a nuclear catastrophe, and that the nuclear power plant would blow up, or that, we'd be caught in like a Hiroshima type explosion. Ironically, if it was stolen nuclear material that Mike Hammer encounters in Kiss Me Deadly, or that Otto encounters in Repo Man, I don't imagine it would glow. It would just irradiate him in the most horrible way and kill him with bone cancer within a couple of weeks, But that's not so cinematic. Therefore, the stolen nuclear material has to glow, and the aliens, whatever it is in there, has to glow.
I love it. It's such a beautiful homage, and it works in both films equally well.
And they do it in Pulp Fiction as well. I mean, there's the same thing.
That's
there's a
right.
case there that I think that Tim Roth has got, where they open the thing and the light comes out, and you're thinking, what can it be? But it's like stolen nuclear material, because it always is.
So then did you take all these different disparate elements and then sit down and write the screenplay? Or I know that Dick Rude had something to do with it, who plays his friend in it, right? Did he have anything to do with the screenplay writing?
Dick Rude and his friend Brant Reiter had written a 12-page screenplay called Leather Rubbernecks.
Okay.
About punk rock teenagers in L.A. And I think I stole the names of the two principal characters, Otto and Duke. But there was a regular script for Repo Man. In fact, I think there were like 14 different drafts of Repo Man as we kept, printing them up and at the photocopy shop, which as it used to be in those days, and sending them out in the U.S. mail to Peter McCarthy, one of the producers, estimated that we sent out 100 copies of the script of Repo Man.
Just to get interest, or
no, to try and get money, to
try to get money
might finance it.
And so, Michael Nesmith, best known for the Monkees, he came on as a producer.
Script number 100 reached Michael Nesmith, and somehow he was interested in it, or he was interested in it by somebody else that he knew, told him about it, and he became our executive producer.
And that was what pushed it over the edge to actually get made.
Yes, he found the money.
Incredible.
Yep. Wonderful. A wonderful thing to happen. It was tremendous that Nesmith became our executive producer and did that.
And, but it's also wonderful that you sent out 100 of them, because some people might give up at 99, but you kept going.
Wasn't it lucky? You see, Peter never gives up. Peter is indefatigable.
That's great. And so then, how did Universal get involved? Because it is a Universal film, right?
That was Nesmith. I mean, it was Nesmith had sent it to Universal and they had rejected it. And then one evening, Nesmith found himself in a bar called Morton's, a watering hole for the Hollywood execs of the day.
Sure.
And he recalled he was in there with somebody's manager. The manager of Kenny Rogers, I think, who also wanted to manage Nesmith. And this guy was a bit of a player, And so he says to Mike, and they're all there, and all these executives are there, and they're all there in cowboy-style jumpsuits, because that was the fashion of the day in Hollywood executive land. And something to do with Urban Cowboy. And so Nesmith, so this guy, the manager, goes, "So what you working on today, Michael? What projects have you got going?" And Michael goes, "Well, I had a good project going, but didn't seem to go anywhere. It was called Repo Man, and it was a good script, bright young guys making it, but just couldn't get it going, And this manager guy goes, "Well, did you send it to Universal?" And Nesmith goes, "Yeah, they just rejected it yesterday." And the manager goes, "Look over there. Standing at the bar is Bob Ramey, head of Universal. Hey, Bob, over here, get over here." And Ramey comes over. "What? Yeah. And, and they introduce him. They've met before. And he goes, "Michael Nesmith's here. And he's got a great script, which you guys just rejected. What's it called, Michael?" And Michael goes, "Repo Man." "Repo Man, it's a great script. Why aren't you making it?" And this Ramey, the head of the studio, totally on the spot in this bar, goes, "Well, what's the budget, Michael?" And Michael goes, "$1 million and a bit, And Ramey goes, "Well, I guess we are, And the next day, Nesmith gets a call from a very disgruntled assistant of Ramey called Tom Mount, who goes, "That Repo Man script that we passed on?" And Nesmith goes, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, I guess we're doing it." And that was the story of how it happened, because Nesmith, who wasn't a drinker and didn't go out, to bars very much, had been taken out to this Morton's this one time by a guy who wanted to impress him,
That is amazing. I love that story.
Isn't that funny? It's a funny story.
LA is not the easiest place to live, but once in a while you have these party moments that make something happen. And I can't talk about it yet, but I have a story happening now that happened at a St. Patrick's Day party. That's how it started. And I realized if I didn't live here, it never would have happened. And it's like, well, that's why I live here. It's like to make those magic connections. And here you're living proof, because the film would not have been made otherwise.
Nesmith is living proof, because his magical nature included not only the monkeys, but his mother inventing liquid paper.
There you go. He was set for life one way or the other.
Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah.
And so at that point, had you had been thinking about casting? Did you know who you wanted, or then you started casting and it became a real thing?
We'd done a lot of casting. Vicky Thomas, who was the casting director, she had been working on the film for some months, and so we'd interviewed a lot of people. I'd already talked to Harry Dean about doing it. As soon as the money came, we went out to Dennis Hopper and offered him the lead role, but his agent wanted slightly more money than was in the budget. And so, so Harry Dean was like, our second choice, but really he should have been the first choice, because he was perfect.
I never broke into a car, never hotwired a car, kid. I never broke into a trunk. I shall not cause harm to any vehicle, nor the personal contents thereof, nor through inaction let that vehicle or the personal contents thereof come to harm. It's what I call the repo code, kid. Don't forget it. Etch it in your brain. Not many people got a code to live by anymore. Hey, look at that. Look at those assholes over there. Ordinary fucking people. I hate them. Me too. What do you know?
So wonderful. And then I had read somewhere a rumor that they wanted Mick Jagger to play his part.
Oh, that was funny. That was his own agent. I went to see his agent because I don't even know. I guess I didn't know what anything was, And so I, as the director of the film, went to thank the agent for having a great client like Harry. And and I'm in the office, and the guy says, Harry Dean's too old for this. You don't want to saddle your movie with an old guy. You want somebody younger and more vital. How about Mick Jagger for the role?
His own agent?
Yeah, because this guy also was the agent of Mick Jagger.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. And so I'm like clutching my pearls. No.
Swimming with sharks, indeed.
That was funny.
Well, you made the right choice. I mean, he's such a wonderfully brilliant, understated actor.
Yeah. He's quite a brilliant actor, and it's quite a great performance.
And then, of course, in the part of Otto, our lead hero, you cast Emilio Estevez. And this was at least a year before The Breakfast Club, when he became a superstar. What did you see in Emilio?
He had done a Francis Coppola film called The Outsiders. And there's a scene in The Outsiders where he at the end of the scene, he sits down and opens a refrigerator and takes out a can of beer and a chocolate cake and starts drinking the beer and eating the cake simultaneously. And I just thought, that's the guy,
Yeah, he's wonderful in it too, and
he's very good. He's very deadpan and very cool, and yeah, just right.
Put it on a plate, son. You'll enjoy it more.
Couldn't enjoy it anymore, Mom. This is swell. Dad? Hey, Dad.
What is it, son?
Do you remember that you once told me a long time ago, well, not too long ago, but that you told me that you'd give me $1,000 to go to Europe if I finished school? Well, you know something? You were right about finishing school. That's what I'd like to do. But I want to know if I can have the money first. Like now.
Speaking of eating cake and drinking beer, there's one thing that runs through the whole movie is these generic supermarket products. Mm-hmm. They drink beer that says beer on it, and they eat food out of a can that says food on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if you could tell me how that got incorporated. Was that in the script, or did that was that more happenstance?
It was in a draft of the script, but I think it came when we realized that we couldn't get really any product placement. We thought we'd get like a whole load of free beer for the production, but we couldn't get any product placement apart from the Christmas trees, the little Christmas tree air fresheners. And so we just thought, well, then forget about it. We're not going to have any products, and we're just going to have generic goods. And luckily, Ralph's Supermarket in Los Angeles had started their own generic line with that branding, that very bland white box with a blue and black line. And so they sold beer. They didn't sell a product called drink or a product called food. but they did sell a product called beer. So we just bought. They donated. In fact, they were also they did generously donated a bunch of generic products for our supermarket scenes.
And so you made like mock ones that said food and like that matched the other ones.
Exactly.
Hilarious. And then the tree the air fresheners. That was they just donated those, or they paid to be in the film?
No, they just donated them because it was true. That was in the script from the very beginning. Because my neighbor Mark Lewis, who took me around on the repo trips, to see what the business was like, he said, you're going to find one of these Christmas trees in every car you repossess, because the only person who would spend money on a flaky thing like this and hang it in their car is the kind of flake who won't pay what they owe. And I'm okay, but then it was true. Every
Hilarious.
car that I was involved in repossessing had one of those air fresheners, either hanging from the mirror or on the floor. Isn't that funny?
I mean, and you can still, every time you go get your car washed, they have those, where you pay, you can buy those off the wall, and they smell disgusting. I don't know why anyone would put them in their car.
And if you get one, you're the kind of flake loser who's going to not pay their repo payments either.
But I love that you went to the company and they donated some to you. So, they were a sponsor.
Even better, they said, do you want them with or without the smell? We're like, without the smell, of course. I'm like, I thought so.
Which brings us to the whole car element of it. And I happen to be in between cars right now. So I'm fully in the LA auto mindset. And there's something about, until you live in LA, you don't quite know what it is. But then once you're here, you are so dependent on your car. It is such a car-centric place. And I really got off on that part of the movie that, that they are taking away these people's like family members, but even though it's just a car, and the lengths that people will go to get revenge on them for doing such a thing, and what a dangerous job it was.
Yeah, well, that is true, because people need their cars. Unless you got a lot of time on your hands, you need a car.
And so you actually went on ride-arounds and did what Otto did. You repoed cars.
Yes,
and
I would repo cars, and I would get $25 if I drove the car back to the repo yard. I would get $25.
Now, was this in the name of research, or did you actually need some spending money?
Oh, both. I mean, who wouldn't like $25? But also it was research. It was good. It was really interesting, and it informs the movie. All of the stuff that Harry Dean says is stuff that I heard Repo Man say most often. My neighbor.
And it's such classic dialogue. I mean, there's all these mantras and things that they say. So can you remind us of some of those great lines?
Harry Dean had amalgamated a lot of lines that were separated into the repo code, where he has this thing about all the things you mustn't do. But I couldn't remember any of them now. I mean, and there's a whole bunch of good speeches in the film. There's Tracy Walter as Miller has a very long speech about time machines and why people disappear in Latin America and why he doesn't drive.
Right.
Because the more you drive, the less intelligent you are.
I do my best thinking on the bus. That's how come I don't drive, see?
You don't even know how to drive.
I don't want to know how. I don't want to learn, see? The more you drive, the less intelligent you are.
I remember one is never die for a car. I like that line.
Only an asshole gets killed for a car.
An asshole gets killed for a car. Guys that make it are the guys that get in their cars at any time.
Now, only an asshole gets killed for a car. And
then there's the sushi line. There's a line about let's go and get sushi and not pay.
Oh dear, what a shame.
Come on, Duke, let's go do those crimes.
Yeah, let's go get sushi and not pay.
It's a highly, highly quotable script, which is, I think, why all my friends in high school were saying it to each other. Just the line where he introduces himself as Otto, and they go, like, Auto Parts? That used to be...
Got a name, kid?
Yeah, it's Otto.
Auto parts?
And I should say I have a little Frenchie now, and his name is Otto. So that's a little tribute to.
Oh, wow, that's very nice.
Yes. So you have this great script and this crazy out there plot, but it really comes together. It's truly magical, and I think you filmed it 40 years ago, almost to the day, right? In L.A.
Let me think. It was filmed in 1983 in July and August. So yes,
it's coming up.
July and August will be the 40th anniversary of the shoot of Repo Man.
Was it a smooth shoot? Did the city cooperate? And
oh, the city was fine because the city was much smaller in those days. I mean, it was a much there were far fewer buildings. There was far less traffic. There was no surveillance. It was very different. But today it would be a more complicated undertaking.
Yeah, it did have the punk ethos to it. I felt like you guys were kind of like getting away with something, but maybe that's...
because a lot of the time we didn't have permits. We did have permits for some of the big things that we did, or things that involved stunt driving. But then we would just go and do other stuff, and as if we were still students at UCLA. And that was obviously very naughty, but you could get away with it in those days because there wasn't, there weren't so many people. There weren't people living on the street. There weren't so many cops. There wasn't so much traffic.
And it was your first film. So were you learning on the job, or because it's a very accomplished, technically complicated film, but you did it with aplomb. So how?
But that was thanks to the people that I worked with. That was thanks to the really good actors that we had, and thanks to the producers who were great, who were really, really fantastic and very able and creative producers, and thanks to the technical people, the sound guys, and the camera departments, and the music, the great music, and also the great editor Dennis Dolan, who really did put his mark on it as well. I mean, it was a real collaborative enterprise that so began with Nesmith and ended with Iggy Pop.
Which brings us to the music, and as I understand it, the music, which is an incredible soundtrack, which includes classic punk bands. We mentioned a few already: Suicidal Tendencies, Black Flag. Iggy Pop sings the title song. Now, how did you get these people to agree to do this film? And then, as I understand it, the soundtrack actually gave the film a second chance at an audience.
Yeah, well, it wasn't hard to get the bands involved for the most part, because I knew some of the people involved, like Tito from the Plugs. I knew, and I guess I knew the Circle Jerks just by going to shows, and so we had asked. And Fear, of course. So we just asked them, can we have one of your songs in the film? And then once we started amassing the songs, Iggy had come out to LA to check out the scene because New York felt to him like it atrophied, and so he got a little apartment off of Hollywood Boulevard, Sunset Boulevard, up on the Strip, and to check out the scene, and so he did this song with one of the guys from the Sex Pistols playing the guitar, and so it was just very fortuitous that LA had this kind of gravitational thing or pull as far as rock and roll was concerned in the late 70s and early 80s. And
so you put this soundtrack together, and then Universal sees the final cut, and it's they how do they feel about the film?
Well, by that point, there'd been a regime change at the studio. Bob Raby was out and a new studio head was in. And so, as often happens when there's a regime change, the new regime has to discount all the previous regime's projects. And ours was among the discountees, along with a couple of films that actually I thought was very good. Rumblefish.
Sure.
So among the turkeys that they were dumping, or throwing into the dumpster, there were actually two good films. There was Repo Man and there was Rumblefish. And Repo Man got saved from Studio Oblivion by the record, because at that point the studio was part of a larger conglomerate, the MCA Music conglomerate, and so at one point, Irving Azoff, who was in charge of MCA, calls his homologue over at Universal, Lou Wasserman or whoever it is, and says, "Lou, we got this record here, Repo Man, Oh, yeah? Yeah, it's selling like hot cakes over there in Baltimore and New York and Akron, Ohio. And is there a movie that goes with this?" And so they actually re-released Repo Man and Rumblefish under the auspices of a new little mini company that I think was called Universal Special Handling or Universal Classics or something. And so it actually, so it made it into the theaters. And then it played opposite Iggy Pop's flat in Bleecker Street in New York. It played in one cinema, I think, for like a year and a half.
So it had a very short initial run, and then it became like a repertory re-release, or
yes.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, it played very briefly it played for a week in LA and Chicago, and then was done. I was going to go straight to cable, and I think it did play on cable. But even after it had been on cable, then all of a sudden it got a theatrical re-release,
and then of course it became this cult sensation.
Yeah, so it was very, so it in the end, there it is to this day.
And it also corresponded with the rise of VHS or Betamax and home video, and because I'm sure that's how I saw it originally. And
Nesmith, again, the smartness of Nesmith, because Nesmith kept the video rights to Repo Man. He reserved them for his company, Pacific Arts, I think for 10 years. So the VHS you saw, it might have been not a Universal VHS, but a Pacific Arts VHS.
There you go. And it's a testament to his intuition. He obviously had the magic touch.
Yeah, and he was and prescient in that way. So even though he wasn't into punk rock, but he was still, he didn't in the end kind of to fight against it.
And when the movie originally, was there like a premiere? Was there a party? Like how did it originally bow?
No, I don't think there was a party. No, no. It came out in Chicago and played for a week and played for a week in LA.
So it truly is one of these miracle films. I consider them. They're films that could have easily just disappeared.
Yeah, we were very lucky. Yeah. And that was really thanks to this, the record doing so well, and a guy called Kelly Neal, who ran this Universal Classics division and had only 2 films to distribute, Repo Man and Rumblefish.
When you were hunting down all these punk songs, did it occur to you that, a best-selling soundtrack is a great marketing tool? Or were you just saying, I love this music?
No, Jonathan Wax, the other producer, Peter McCarthy and Jonathan Wax were the producing team. And Jonathan Wax said, this is going to be the Easy Rider of the 80s. And we're going, no, John, you're crazy. Shut up, And yes, but that was true because of the musical aspect. Because that was what really made or contributed to the phenomenon of Easy Rider as well, was the soundtrack.
Very interesting. And yeah, it came to pass. That's so cool.
Jonathan, you see, prescient.
You surrounded yourself with good people.
Lucky. Yeah. Many of whom were alumni of UCLA.
It's great. Last season, everyone was USC, but I like to hear what UCLA has to offer.
Oh, this was a good generation. We were all in awe of Charles Burnett, because Charles Burnett had been ahead of, the generation ahead of us at UCLA, or half a generation, and so we had a print of Killer of Sheep, a 16 millimeter print, and would watch this and think, that's the best student film ever made. And it was, and it's a great, not just a student film, it's one of the best films ever made. It's incredible. So Charles was like our film hero, and Penelope Spheris had gone before us as well, So I have to ask, so you put all this effort into this quirky, out-of-the-box film. It almost dies. Then it has this second life. And what does that do for you, for your ego and for your career? And what becomes of Alex Cox after this movie becomes a cult hit? Oh, it's just stuff, I mean, you could just look at the films that I made, when I made them, and who financed them, and the story is clear. I made 2 or 3 films in fairly quick succession, but then culminated this early burst of exciting work. Much of it funded by the studio by doing a film called Walker in Nicaragua, which brought me into terrible disrepute. Because the US was at war with Nicaragua at the time. And we made a film about the American guy who was like the first American president of Nicaragua. And Ed Harris played it like perfectly. So the film upset a lot of people. And then I made a lot more films, but in different circumstances. I made several films in Mexico. I became an actor in the Mexican cinema, and I appeared as an actor in the most popular Mexican film of all time, La Ley de Herodes, directed by Luis Estrada.
Wow. What did you play in that?
I played an evil gringo who hates Mexicans.
Mr. Robert, do you think that democracy is the solution for countries like Mexico?
No. We Americans also like dictatorships like yours.
So I'm just curious about the attempts to make a sequel. I assume people have approached you.
No, we have I and the producers, various producers over the years, have approached Universal because until recently, Universal had the rights to the sequel. So we, on various occasions, reached out to Universal over the years to say, let's do a sequel. And on one occasion, we had a script that was then called Otto's Hawaiian Holiday. And Peter McCarthy and Jonathan Wax, they lived in Santa Fe. Michael Nesmith lived in Carmel. And I don't know where I lived, but we all went to LA for the meeting about Otto's Hawaiian Holiday. We were having a meeting with the Universal exec to discuss making the sequel at last, about 10 years after the film. So we get there, and as we go in, we see all of these dustbins outside the offices overflowing with like Repo Man publicity materials, which have all just been put in the trash. I was thinking, that's a bit strange, isn't it? What an odd thing to see before you go into the meeting. So then we go into the meeting with the then executive, this young lady, and talk to her about the script, etc. Nesmith's there, Wax, McCarthy, and me. And at the end of the meeting, she says, "Oh yeah, well, I really must watch this movie Repo Man." I was thinking, oh my.
That's not what you want to hear.
Yeah, we came all this way for a meeting with somebody who hasn't even seen the film. And Nesmith was so annoyed, Nesmith swore that he would never go to Los Angeles again for any reason.
Wow.
And I don't imagine that really came to pass, because then when the Monkees toured, I'm sure they played in LA.
What about Emilio? Has he ever expressed an interest in returning to Otto?
He was at one point going to do it, but then he dropped out. It was unfortunate because I think we were at another point we were going to do Otto's Hawaiian Holiday as Waldo's Hawaiian Holiday, and so it would look kind of different but be the same script. And he was going to be in that for a while, but then he dropped out. I don't know what happened. But more interestingly, a few years ago, about 3 or 4 years ago, the rights to Repo Man, screenplay, sequels, remakes, etc., reverted to me. So that means that now it's possible for me to do a sequel to Repo Man 40 years later.
Oh my God, you got to do it.
Yeah.
Get the whole cast back together.
Yeah, well, we'll see, because some aren't with us anymore. But it's something that we should do. And while we survive, the survivors. And also, I think there's still a certain residual interest in the old Repo Man phenomenon, because I went a month ago to the music hall in San Francisco, where a group called the Red Room Orchestra did a Repo Man show, where they did like all the music from the film, not only the punk rock stuff, but the boogie woogie stuff that Harry Dean Stanton listened to in his car. They did all of this stuff, and interspersed it with clips of dialogue from the film, and had some of the original Repo people there, including Tito Lariva of the Plugs and Xander Schloss of the Circle Jerks, and me there. And it was really there, and it must have had it was a capacity, I imagine, of the place was 500 or 600 people, and it was full. So that was pretty good.
There you go. There's got to be legions out there that would kill for.
At least we can go on tour. At least we can take the music. We can do the Repo Man musical show and take it on tour. I got back and I called my friend Satya, who lives by the Hollywood Bowl, and I said, "Satya, we had a great time up there in this auditorium. What about the bowl? What's the capacity of the bowl?" And he goes, "The Hollywood Bowl seats like 200,000 people and is booked up 3 years in advance. Would you like me to investigate further?" I said, "No, we'll seek a different venue."
I think the Hollywood Bowl is closer to 15,000, and I'm sure people would love to come out and see all those bands play.
He told me 200,000.
He was way off.
15,000. We could easy fill the Hollywood Bowl.
Maybe you could turn it into a Broadway musical.
Oh man, that would be with flying cars. Yeah.
Well, they have Back to the Future now is coming to Broadway, so I don't see why Repo Man couldn't come to Broadway.
That's so funny.
I have one other question now. There's a famous speech in the film that I know you've written about, and it's the John Wayne speech.
John Wayne was a fag.
What did you say, Melissa?
What? John Wayne was a fag.
The hell he was!
He was too, you boys. I installed two-way mirrors in his pad in Brentwood. And he come to the door in a dress.
You're fucking nuts.
Oh, that doesn't mean he was a homo, Miller.
Don't?
A lot of straight guys like to watch their buddies fuck.
They do?
No, I do. Yeah.
I'd love to just go over it. Why don't you explain a bit about what's said in that speech and how it ended up in the film?
The John Wayne speech was said to me in front of witnesses, one of whom is still alive, by a guy called Swatty. He had Arrow Glass and Mirror was his company in Venice, California. And Swatty installed, windows. And Swatty swore to me and these other people that were drinking beer in a motorcycle garage, he swore that he had installed two-way mirrors in John Wayne's pad in Brentwood, and that John Wayne came to the door in a dress. And, believe it or don't, but that's what this guy told us. And so I felt, why not include that in Repo Man? As it's a total Los Angeles story. Now, somebody told me that can't be true because John Wayne lived on a battleship in San Pedro Bay, But maybe he had a place in Brentwood, I don't know.
Now, just for some of our younger listeners, that's like saying Tom Cruise showed up at your door in a dress. I mean, it's not the kind of thing you just sort of toss out lightly in a studio picture, and yet they let it happen. Were there any repercussions?
Isn't it? It just I guess that nobody read the script. They just hadn't read the script because it was always in the script, and
it's quite shocking. I have to say, I did not see it coming. But the funny thing is I've heard a similar story, but about a different actor, Raymond Burr, and this was the first person story. Told me they went to deliver something to his house, and he answered in a dress.
and J. Edgar Hoover too. Apparently, if you J. Edgar Hoover's office, if you didn't knock on the door, you'd find the FBI director in high heels.
Maybe they also shopped at the same big and tall ladies store.
Could be.
Well, that's a very funny story and a wonderful film. Thank you so much, Alex. This was so fun. You're such an original, and I so appreciate you taking time to stop in. It happened in Hollywood and share the making of this classic.
It's a pleasure. Well, thank you very much for inviting me, and it was nice talking to you.
Okay, and there you have it, the making of Repo Man. If you haven't seen it, check it out. Harry Dean Stanton is fantastic in it. Emilio Estevez, very charming, right before he does Breakfast Club. And It's really weird and really a snapshot of a place and time. So check out Repo Man. And then before next week, I urge you to check out Wayne's World. Yes, Wayne's World, that comedy classic from 1992, because we have Penelope Spheris, the documenter of this very hardcore scene, making her mainstream scripted film debut. And she is a riot. You are going to love Penelope Spheris. So get ready for next week. And until then, I'll see you in Hollywood.